climate action is not a global north issue or a global south issue. It is our collective challenge and it affects all of us. We need to come up with common global solutions, said President Ruto in the now ongoing Africa Climate Summit. The Africa Climate Summit is co-hosted by the government of Kenya and the African Union to help showcase climate financing in Africa, but also help come up with adaptive solutions to help combat the adverse effects of climate change. Joining me to discuss tonight's topic, which is the Africa Climate Summit, the role of students in protecting the environment, I'm joined by distinguished ladies and gentlemen from renowned universities here in Uganda to help dissect tonight's conversation. Without any particular order, I'm just going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, mention the institutions they're from, so that you can get acquainted to know with whom we are going to have this wonderful conversation with. Right from my right, I'm going to go ahead and let the lady, the beautiful lady, go ahead and introduce herself, so that you, the audience, gets to know, and right up to my extreme right, then we can begin the conversation. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Barbra Clarissa Nabulya from Muteesa, the First Royal University. I'm happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you here, Barbra, and we're looking forward to having a wonderful conversation with you.
Exactly.
Gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. My name is Fahad Mucunguzi, and I'm coming from Muteesa, the First Royal University. I'm very happy to be at Civic Space TV.
As you can see, we have two very eloquent young people from Muteesa One Royal University who will help us dissect tonight's conversation. I don't want to spoil the other, but they are very interesting individuals. Let me get to you, Patience.
Thank you so much, Drake. My name is Fathum Eva from Islamic University in Uganda, that is Kampala campus, based in Civic. I'm humbled to be at Civic Space TV one more time.
Thank you very much. We are definitely happy to have you. You know, when young people engage in these conversations often and show interest, it's something that we as Civic Space TV and Center for Constitutional Governance always look out for, and we're very happy that you honored an invitation and you're here. Thank you. The gentleman who is very familiar on the show. Please say hello.
It's a pleasure to be here once again. My name is Nyombi Haruna from Islamic University in Uganda. I also, Drake, I didn't tell you, I also serve as the minister for Bulungi Wansi in Kobazambogo, Bagana Kobazambogo Association.
You are the Kawaka's man.
Yes, as well as the coordinator of Human Rights Association.
Very happy to have you here,
Islamic University in Uganda, Kampala campus.
Definitely. We are happy to have you,
Yes.
and we're looking forward to having a wonderful conversation. So let us put context to tonight's conversation. Right now, there is the ongoing Africa Climate Summit here happening in Kenya, Nairobi, that is co-hosted by the government of Kenya and the African Union to help lobby for climate financing, to help Africa, help East Africa, to help Kenya adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. But just to put context in tonight's conversation, I'll begin with you in no particular order, my brother. Just help us contextualize tonight's conversation. We are talking about the role of students in protecting the environment. Before we go into their role particularly, I want us to understand how severe the climate situation is. Please help us paint that picture.
Thank you so much. As we dwell into the discussion about climate change, I think I can also take you through the Sustainable Development Goals. You must be aware that we are left with about 7 years to the climax of that
SDGs.
The SDG 30, and the climate aspect, I think, is SDG 13, where we are talking about climate action. We are trying to combat the effects of climate change. How do we conserve our environment? How do we ensure that there is sustainable development? And so this should be a concern for all of us, especially Africa. As you may be aware, Africa, we are affected. We emit about 2 to 3% of the global emissions. And remember, all these, most of them are not from here. Yeah. They are from outside the continent. And as a result, we are experiencing losses to a tune of between 7 billion and 14 billion annually as a result of climate change. And therefore, it should be a concern for all of us as Africans, but of course as human beings, because this is life that we're talking about. If there is climate change, it affects human nature and even the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm so happy about this conversation that we're going to at least find solutions that we'll be offering to the people outside there, our leaders, and even the fellow students.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's quite true that Africa as a continent, we emit less than 3%, to be exact, of the global house gas emissions. And you then realize that as a continent, we are facing the adverse effects of climate change that has happened. The countries or the global north, global south that went ahead and emitted most of the greenhouse gas emissions that are affecting us today happened from them. And that's a call for climate justice. But we shall get to that. Let me get to you, Patience. Before we delve deeper into breaking down this particular topic, how would you term or how would you contextualize in your introduction to tonight's conversation?
Today's introduction is basically about Africa Climate Summit.
Yeah.
One thing we should all know that climate is a just key for all of us as Africans. And I, for one in particular, I'm much more into the environment. I love the environment that I live in. So if we, the citizens, or if we as a country, if we as a continent, we don't put in much effort in making sure that our environment is safe for us to live in, then we shall not have a...
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. I definitely get your point, where you're trying to bring the idea that environment is a very key factor and it's very important. And as a generation, personally, it warms my heart to see very many young people engaged in conversations relating to environment. It's wonderful. If you're to see what's happening in Nairobi right now, how many young people are engaged, how many young people want to see that we hold the people who led to the largest greenhouse gas emissions accountable, and they should finance and all that. Personally, it makes me happy, and I get your point. Thank you very much. Mr. Fahad,
Yes, Drake.
your quick introduction to tonight's conversation.
Okay, thank you, Drake. First and foremost, I can see that climate issues are up and down across the globe. We are seeing that across each and every platform. For example, I'm in a platform of Africa Youth Leads Initiative, but when you find that youth are talking about leadership, youths are talking about things that are to put them forward in leadership, they also bring in issues of climate change. So we find that climate change has had an impact here in Uganda, in Africa, and across the globe. Go to areas of America. You see, you recall the bushfires. You go to Europe, there are bushfires. It's simply because of the emissions that the ozone layer is being destroyed. So we have to find a solution, and a very convincing solution towards the problems that are brought up by what? By climate change. And the Africa Climate Summit in particular is coming during a time when we are in dire need of seeing change towards development, but which has to start with finding solution to why climate is trying to take us through all these struggles. You find that people are suffering, droughts and everywhere. So if we find solution, then the money that would have been spent on trying to combat problems brought by climate change, that money will be used to develop the Africans and the people in the whole world. So at least we have seen that Europe and the other countries have done good to go in for COP27, which was in Egypt some time back. So now we are preparing for COP28, which is going to be in Dubai. And if all that goes well, we shall see that there will be funding from those rich countries to the poor countries, which at most do not even emit a lot of greenhouse gases. In Africa, particularly, as you've said, it is not more than 3%. And we cannot have curtains, to put all over Africa, so that maybe our atmosphere is different from what? From the other atmospheres. But then we need to find a collective solution so that we can live in a world free of greenhouse gases.
Yes.
Thank you very
As
much.
you had it there, collective solutions, just like President Ruto put it, that we need to come up with common global solutions, because we live in one environment. It's not like the environment in Uganda is different from the environment in South Africa or that of Mexico. It's still the same. Barbra, your introduction or your understanding of tonight's conversation before we delve deeper.
Okay, thank you so much. The issue of climate change is very vital. And to say if Africa as a continent is to plan on the things that should keep it going as a continent, I think that the African delegates should come together to find solutions of how to better the climate changes in Africa. Because when we think about climate change, we have to also think about the ways of living. Because the change in climate affects the lives of people. So as African delegates, they should plan and come up with solutions that are really standing. So they plan for the betterment of Africa in the changes of climate.
Okay, thank you. Let me begin with you, my brother. You earlier on in the submission said that Africa we emit less than 3%. And I want us right now to first dissect the climate change impact in Africa. And before I ask you a question, I just want to give you a brief context. Africa as a continent, at the moment, we are the most prone continent when it comes to climate change. Prone in that we are poor, prone in that we do not have the adaptive capacity, among others. But that aside, in the year 2020 to 2022, statistics have it that a population of 52 million Africans suffered adverse effects of climate change through droughts and floods. That constitutes 4% of the African continent. And 52% of that population, majority of them come from sub-Saharan Africa. And Uganda is situated in sub-Saharan Africa. Kenya, East African countries are situated in sub-Saharan Africa. That means even with the 52 million people, let's just get down to the individual countries. We have a number of poor people who are in these countries who do not have the capacity. Let's say a Onen Douglas Drake has a farm and is a poor person, and then drought comes and kills all his crops. Definitely he's going to suffer from, he won't have what to eat, he will not feed his children, among others. Now, my question to you therefore is, how is climate change affecting African countries differently compared to other regions?
Thank you so much. Like you put it, when you look at Africa, one, we are a poor continent. And so the meager resources that we would have used to handle other services that maybe we need into health, education, you realize that we must again put all those resources into combating these effects of climate change. As a continent, we do not have that capacity, especially for these calamities, climate change calamities that are not from within, they are externally brought to us. We do not have the capacity to do away with them. But also in the way of life of Africans, I think we have changed quite much from what we're supposed to do to combat the effects of climate change. Probably one would say because of poverty. For instance, when you look at deforestation, some would argue we are poor, we have nothing to eat, and therefore our only source of living is maybe if we lock down these trees and maybe get some little money for sustainability. I think it's also about the policies that we have. Some of these policies are weak that we have in Africa, and also the sensitization of the people. People are not sensitized about their ways of life in relation to climate change. How do you live sustainably in terms of economic activities, your social well-being?
Yeah.
This is a place where I find people just take it for granted. Or person just disposes of plastic waste anywhere, and they don't mind at all. I wish those people are educated and sensitized about the impact of what they are doing. Probably would combat some of the things. Some of them, if I may say, about the way of life of individuals, how we live as individuals, that would not even need someone to come and say, okay, have policies. We just need to sit down and think about things that are going to help us conserve our environment as persons. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to get to you, Patience. From where he has stopped, he highlights, I asked him a question of how does climate change affect Africa differently just from other regions? And he highlights three key things. That one, we are poor people, poverty. Two, people are very ignorant and lack information as regards to climate change. But three, our way of life, how we live, but also that contributes to the effects that we're facing today. In your opinion, do you think, why is it that, the similar question I asked him, how does climate change hit Africa differently from other regions?
Okay, thank you so much. My point will not really differ from what the previous speaker said earlier. Basically, in Africa, there are quite a number of laws that are put in place to conserve the environment and also the climatic change at large. But these laws and these rules put in place are not implemented.
Yeah.
One reason being, in Africa, we all have our own different ways of living.
Yep.
You find that in Africa, as you had brought it out earlier, we are a poor continent, we are all poor. So you find that our way of living is we rely on farm work and other activities just to feed. So you find that a family will have to, other people go to the forests just to get food, cut down the trees to make drums and get money from that to feed their families. So through that, you find that it's initially affecting the climate, which is a different story with the other continent out there. You find that other continents out there, the government properly plans for the citizens, which is not the same story in Uganda or in Africa at large. So in Africa, it's like we are hand to mouth. We are feeding hand to mouth. So you find that everyone is like, let's find a way of surviving. So survival can be in a form of carrying out farm work, carrying out deforestation, and we are also ignorant about the law. There are laws which are put there in place, but we're ignorant about them. And then we spend the way we think.
Yeah.
We really don't think twice before spending, or we don't think twice before carrying out any act. So in Africa, basically I would say we are ignorant, and that is why basically we are being affected about, we are highly affected when it comes to climate change.
Okay. Fahad, I seem to have a different opinion from what my sisters and brother have submitted as regards to regards to ignorance. That we are ignorant of the laws that are existent. We are ignorant of the adverse effects of climate change, and that is why at the moment we are facing these particular effects. I hold the opinion and view, and I would say that climate change hits poor people hardest. And when we have to categorize it in terms of vulnerability, vulnerability refers to conditions determined by our physical, by our social and economic factors, of which Uganda's population of 48 million people, 41% of that population are poor people. Not so? Almost half our population are poor people. That means if today we were hit by huge amounts of rainfall, and let's say Kampala flooded and very many households were washed away, our government will not have the capacity to provide us with decent housing after a few days, like what is happening in the West when huge monsoon winds come and hit the houses. That said, my question to you therefore is, how is climate change really affecting us differently? Is it that we do not have good laws, or is it the fact that we are so poor that we need to have the climate financing?
Thank you, Drake. Climate change, when you look at the African continent, is affecting us indeed differently. But this is simply because of a few points. For example, when you talk about poverty, when you look at the international poverty line, you find that many Africans live below it. So when you go across the globe, where you can find yourself financing a certain project, then maybe you can survive in one way or the other in case of anything like a torrential rainfall.
Yeah.
You remember what happened in Turkey, the earthquake.
Yeah.
After it, just within a few months, homesteads were risen and people were able to do what? To stay. But imagine if such a situation happened in Uganda here, my beloved brother, you would find that people are just being evicted from their homes and being taken somewhere else, even without any housing. Yeah. But when someone talks about the poverty in Africa, I want to say that that issue is just within us, and we're just living under what I should call a colonial mindset, where we are not poor as such. Because even if it was because of poverty, even what we emit depicts our poverty levels. So if we emit little, it means we shall not be affected as such. If we emit much as because of the industries like in Europe, then it means we shall be affected very much.
Yeah.
But it is because of the way we have to find solution. I want to specifically say the rich countries and the rich continents have to come in and sponsor whatever Africa is going through,
the
because
damages
that are being caused by the climate change. If globally we can emit only about 2 to 3% of the global greenhouse emissions. So how about when you go to Europe? They started banning fossil fuels very many years ago during the times of slave trade.
And allow me guide this debate. You see, the effects of climate change that we experience today is one that started way back.
Obviously.
So what we are facing today is as a result of the effects of what they did then, the emissions they did then, the effects they had on the environment then. And that's why we are facing the challenge today.
Even back then, when I was doing my research, I reached a certain point where I said those people started emitting carbon fumes during the time even maybe early man hadn't discovered fire here in Africa.
I know.
Because when you look back, they used to have trains when these were just, doing certain things.
It was during the Industrial Revolution, whereby they used a lot of coal. They mined a lot of coal and burnt a lot of coal and cut a lot of trees. Yes.
Yeah, I just brought it just to show how intense it was back then. Because even during the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have any industry, let me say in Uganda, I won't go to Africa at large. So it means, yes, we have a great impact due to climate change. Yeah. We've seen droughts everywhere. We are talking about climate change at a period where we're supposed to be in the rainfall season here in Uganda. But the sun is scorching wherever you're going on the streets of Kampala. So the climate change has affected us so much so that delegates have to find solutions, everlasting solutions, to combat this issue. Yeah. And when we compare between Africa and those outside countries, we find that Africa is being affected, but then there must be reparations towards the effects of climate change on Africa. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbra, I want us to look at this. Tonight we're talking about the role of students in protecting the environment. My sister Patience, my brother Fahad, and they highlighted the aspects, the challenges that Africa is facing as a continent as regards to effects of climate change. Yeah. Now, I want you to help tell us, what are the most pressing climate-related issues that students should be aware of?
Okay. Thank you so much. Can you please pardon your question?
The question is
students.
Yeah, the question is, what are the most pressing climate-related challenges that students should be aware of?
Okay, thank you. First of all, a student out there watching this show should be aware of the burning fossils fuel. Like those things come, you see, all the cars running on the road produce the burning fossil fuels. So students out there should be aware of that. And again, they should also be aware of the cutting down of the trees back there in their villages, because their parents may not be aware. But then students should be aware that if trees are cut down, these forests conserve that carbon dioxide. So if trees are cut down, this carbon dioxide is going to be going, and it will be damaging the climatic changes. Yeah. So basically, students should be aware of those things.
All right, thank you. My brother, uh, I want us to look at the conversation from the angle of floods, droughts, the challenges that Africa is facing as a continent.
Yeah.
And we're a continent that largely depends on agriculture. I'm speaking from the perspective of a Ugandan. She highlighted that the issues of cutting down of trees, excessive burning of fossil fuels are among the issues that contribute to the adverse effects of climate change. In your opinion, what do you think are the most pressing climate-related issues that the student out there should know and act against?
Not different from what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because if we do not conserve the environment, things to do with floods, we are most likely not to survive. Yeah, if such calamities came to us, because if the environment is not well preserved or even protected, such things we are susceptible to experiencing. Such things. You talked about drought. That means hunger in the near future.
Yeah.
We will not have enough food. Look at what's happening in northern Uganda, at least in the areas of Karamoja. We've not been having
Over 2,000 people
people
dying.
have been starving because there's not enough food for them to feed those people, and these things are just increasing day in, day out. So as the years get on, you realize all these things, we are going to experience more of this if we don't act. And I think President Tutu talked about this. First, we must hold these people who are really the perpetrators of this, the people who lead to these climatic changes, at least who are involved in activities that are adverse to the climate, to our climate. They should be held accountable, one, but also talk about the priorities as governments, as leaders, and even the common people.
Yeah.
Our priorities. She talked about the fossil fuels, even deforestation. We can think differently. Try to think of other ways so that we can avert all those things. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Patience. I want us to look at the role of women, the role of ladies, the role of girls in combating climate change. At the moment, students are on the forefront. I know a number of students who are engaging on the fight against climate change. And it is one that warms and touches my heart. You realize when in terms of vulnerability, women are the hardest hit when it comes to climate change. So I want you to help dissect the role of the girl child, the role of the woman, the role of ladies in this conversation relating to climate change and how they can help provide lasting solutions.
Thank you so much. Basically, we all want to live in an environment that is free from distress, environment that we all can sit and say, yes, this is home. But right now, I would say that we are not living our dreams. Like there you brought it out, women are basically hit more when it comes to this aspect. What is the role of women when it comes to conserving the environment? First of all, one thing you should know that in Uganda as a country, most parts of the country, we survive on farm work, and it is women basically who engage into farm activities.
Yeah.
We also have a challenge of deforestation, cutting down of trees. So you find that many people are cutting down these trees, not just because they want, but just to create more land to carry out farm work and to feed through that. So here where does a woman come in? There are very many platforms out there that are meant to curb this act of deforestation or this act of these other activities that easily lead to the climate change, to like these kind of activities. How should I say it out? Basically, women should come out and join these NGOs to ensure that these activities are stopped. There are very many ways to feed. There are very many ways for one to acquire land. We should not go through deforestation just to acquire land. And also as a woman, you're out there on the streets, you see someone, majorly these are people with cars. I, for one, I do drive. People with cars. You're in your car, you've taken a bottle of water, you don't have where to throw it or dump it, you'll just throw it out on the streets. You get it? You're just throwing it out on the streets. And what I looked at in Uganda, basically on the streets of Kampala, we have women who are working for KCCA. It is women early in the morning, they are done sweeping the environment. So many women out there should look at this as, I look at it as a disadvantage. You're in your car, you've dumped a bottle out there, students are going to school, you get your piece of paper, have nowhere to dump it, you just throw it there. And tomorrow morning, it's my mother who is sweeping the community for us. So women out there, also women who are in this part of these NGOs, should make sure that we have bins around every city or every state or every area, at least there are bins. Also, they should put effective laws because everyone deserves to live in a clean environment.
Thank you very much, Patience. Barbra, I want to get to you before I come to Fahad. The conversation of gender equality, gender responsibility as to the fight in climate change. How can students who are ladies and girls be involved in the fight against climate change, in your opinion?
Okay, thank you so much. Students who are ladies can, usually women, that gender of females, they always have that convincing tongue. So if a student who is a lady can come out and talk to the rest of the students or even the kids or the males, maybe they can get convinced. So they, sorry about that. The students who are ladies can explain different things. They can explain the effects of climate change. They can explain to the rest of the world the results of dumping rubbish everywhere. And these people may understand better because usually this gender has a convincing tongue. So if a student out there can come out to convince the rest of the world, it may make a change.
All right, thank you. Fahad.
Yes, please.
History has it that our forefathers, or the people who fought for independence and change, were students. You see what happened in South Africa, in Soweto, coming down to Tanzania. Around the continent, the movements and groups were all pushed by students for independence. And in our time and age today, our fight is not one of freedom for independence. Our fight is one that is relating to climate action against climate change. So my question to you, therefore, is I wanted to give us success stories of student organizations that we are seeing coming up with innovative solutions to climate change, but also how can students get involved in climate action at the grassroots level so that we can all collectively come up with global solutions against climate change.
Okay, thank you, Drake, for that kind of question to me. First and foremost, when you ask me about the students, just like you've given me history of those that came to fight colonialism, that they were students. And currently, we're not fighting colonialism, but we are fighting a certain thing even harder than colonialism, which if it comes, it doesn't discriminate. You know, when floods come, they won't discriminate between the rich and the poor. They won't discriminate between the colonialists and the colonized. So climate change probably is a situation where many people have been affected, and you see students coming up. I'll first of all talk about myself. I've been encouraging various students ever since way back. When I was still in secondary, I talked about that issue when I was in Interact. We even gathered some fellows and also, stimulated people to come and start planting trees, afforestation. And there are forests that were grown up during those days between the main characters were in Rotary and they would sponsor students to go and do what? And carry those activities.
Yeah.
Now that is here in Uganda. Many Rotarians are out there and they have helped out in combating the effects of climate change, even when they're not students. But now, when you look at a student, she lives in Sweden, if I've not forgotten. She's called Greta Thunberg. She has been a climate change activist. She has done all her work to see that there is change in the way those big countries behave towards the impacts of climate change. So Greta Thunberg was even one time put behind bars because of advocating for solutions to climate change. And she rallied various students to also see that there is funding at the United Nations to see that climate change and the effects are being combated. When we come to Uganda still, there is one who was a student, but now I think she's graduated. She's called Nakate. Vanessa, if I've not forgotten, Vanessa Nakate. She's been at WIO and I've been watching her trying to advocate for politicians to come in and leave alone playing around politics, but save humanity. So students are at the forefront of fighting against all the evil that is brought by climate change. And I want to urge that at least many should come up, cop from those people like Vanessa Nakate, cop from the people that you see around, like I'm speaking about it. You shouldn't allow, you should carry out proper disposal of waste. And if you cannot use the public transport, you can move on foot if you're not going very far, because we are trying to see that we fight the emissions, the greenhouse gases. So probably that would help, and students have been at the forefront always. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That has been very powerful, and that is true, that we need to get involved in all our various forums of advocacy, all our various forums to help disseminate information, which brings me to the conversation of education and awareness. And when we have conversations relating to climate change, oftentimes in these spaces that I move in, I engage in, and have interact with a number of young people, you realize that even some activists themselves lack enough information of climate change. And if therefore the people who are advocating and pushing for climate action also have limited information, then how about that person who is down there in Kitgum, who is down there in Imbara and doesn't know any information relating to climate change? Definitely therefore calls us to talk about education and awareness. So to my brother Nyombi, I want us to put the conversation to help us understand that what role does education play in raising awareness about climate issues among students? Should we therefore go ahead and have in various institutions have a different module or course that would push or advocate for climate action? Do you think that would be plausible? Maybe you can, in your submission, help substantiate that.
Yeah, since it has not paid off by merely just talking, I think we should also revise our curriculum, the curricula right from primary, and even the mode of teaching, so that wherever a teacher has to come into class to teach this nursery student, the primary, secondary, or even at university level, there should be that time allocated so that this is talked about quite often, so that it's inculcated amongst the students, so that children grow up knowing the importance of preserving the environment. But this will have students, we have citizens who are responsible. Because you will agree with me, this starts with us as individuals, where you're living, the environment you're living in. Unless you've grown up in a place where this is a culture, many people just take it for granted. They'll just take a bottle of water, then drop it anyway after taking my water. Anything. So living responsibly, if people cannot have it amongst them, so we can teach it to them. One, how to reuse, recycle, but even to refuse. Like we have in polythene papers. If you have other alternatives, let's try to engage this and tell them, please, if you feel there's some other option that you can have, some alternative that you can opt for. You can refuse this polythene bag if the shopkeeper is giving it to you, or even you teach them different ways of how they can recycle these products in order to preserve our environment. In terms of planning, we are living in an urban setting. Also, our leaders, we should sensitize the students. We help them raise their voices. How do they raise their voices responsibly in terms of advocacy? To advocate for policies that are aimed at sustainable development, where there is development, but of course sustainably in regards to the environment or climate. Such, we have to inculcate in the students by bringing them on table, teaching them, sensitizing them. In terms of innovation as well, tell them you can opt for this instead of maybe charcoal. You can get engaged in other things that will help you as well to conserve or preserve our environment. So I think that's where our discussion should be heading as leaders and even as students. In my university, like I told you, we have the different associations. In fact, this week, we have the Basoga and Sete, it's called the Basoga and Sete Week. Students from Busoga region, they celebrate this week by involving in different activities. And this week has been about even community sensitization and cleaning. And next month, as Baganda Kwazambogo, we'll be celebrating the Bulungi Bwansi of the Wakabaka wa Uganda, and we'll be having a series of activities around Chibuli area, basically trying to sensitize the public. So we have to bring students on board, and of course we have to call upon different civil society organizations, different persons who are able at least to add their voice onto the students, or even help them to bring this into reality in terms of financing, educating even, because in terms of advocacy, someone could not be having those advocacy skills, but support them. First of all, like you said earlier on, some of the activists don't know what they are doing. They don't know even how to advise the public. And so if you bring them on board, educate them first. So what you have talked to them will be disseminated to the public. And of course, the public will be having good information to take in. Yes.
Right. Barbra, how best do you think institutions can incorporate climate issues into various curricula?
Okay. First and foremost, I think that institutions should come up with a way of making students love their country, the environment, because everything starts with love.
Sure.
If students develop that love for the environment and their country and maybe the continent at large, they'll make sure they don't do anything that is going to disturb the climatic conditions. So, teachers or lecturers in different institutions should come up with a program that is going to instill love, into the hearts of these people, so they start loving their environment. Because you may find a student dumping wastes anyhowly, just because they do not love the space that they're in, okay? So, but you may find that if this same person develops that love for the space where they live, they're going to start taking good care of the place, keeping it clean. Even students themselves will go on sensitizing people down there in the village to stop cutting down trees, to stop disturbing nature, because they love the country. So teachers, lecturers should come up with that program of making students love their environment.
All right, Patience. I have a similar question. Students possess they possess the energy, they possess the time, and they possess the ability to influence communities. How best can we get them involved in the fight relating to climate change in regards to education and awareness, but also have the community engagement and involvement?
Thank you so much. There is an old saying that goes that charity begins at home and doesn't end there. So if at home I see my parents dump waste in trenches, just take that me as a child, I've seen that, I'll not differ from that. Out there, I'll also dump wastes in trenches, in the school compound. I'll litter them around. Reason being, I have that mindset that my parents also dump wastes and in trenches, not in dustbins. And one thing we should also know that the first step of conserving the environment is acquiring knowledge. As a student, how are we going to acquire this knowledge? It is not just about sitting in class and a teacher coming in with a piece of chalk and the blackboard teaching us that this is how we should conserve our environment. Acquiring this knowledge should be taken outside of the classroom. You find that what I like from most secondary schools and most primary schools, teachers take the initiative of taking these students outside, like conducting a research. Of recent, I've been watching on TV, we find that pupils from different primary schools are in Akawa market sweeping. Like just the previous speaker said, we should develop love for our environment. It is our planet. It is our environment. Uganda is a pearl of Africa. It is green. We should conserve that nature, that green color of ours. So teachers should keep on instilling that into the pupils and into the students. Right now in universities, I did know that, I was also ignorant about the last one point. I did know that there is a particular course you need to do with environment. It is there. So through that is how teachers are coming in to lecture these students, to lecture us that we have to have love for our environment. Me having love for my environment, I will end up, I will start sensitizing people out there that it is not good to litter the environment. It is not good to dump waste in water bodies. We should learn how to keep our environment clean. We should conserve our environment. We should stop carrying out deforestation, rather carry out afforestation. So teachers are doing a very good job per se.
All right, from passion to action. That is entirely how I can sum up your argument. Let me listen from my brother Fahad. Still on the question of education and awareness, but how best we can involve students to be the frontliners in dissemination of information relating to climate change and climate action.
Thank you very much. I would like to reiterate on the issue of students being mainly youths. That, bearing that in mind, we know that youths go by entertainment. And we see that where there is entertainment, like go on TikTok, someone does something funny, they get 1 million followers. But you go to YouTube and put there some good content, you find only 2 views. So you wonder, so if youths are just people who like entertainment, and they're mainly in schools, save our brothers who come at old age enrollment, we could, lecturers and the institutions should bring in that kind of entertainment, but in form of what? In form of
edutainment.
Edutainment. Thank you very much. In form of edutainment, something that entertains, but it brings some good outcome. For example, I've seen the cancer run. I've seen help the orphan run. People go there to run, but they are buying packages of about 50,000 Uganda shillings, and in that they're engaging. But if you come and sit me in class, sit my fellow youths in class, start lecturing them about how to cut trees and how not to cut them, I think it would be taken, but then it might not be put into practice. When we come back out here in our environment, however much love we could be having, I would want to go and hunt for money. Remember, our country is some country that is kind of strained, where you find a forest and you can produce your timber, or you can get your charcoal and sell to mango market. You say, Alhamdulillah, I can go and take that that job. So first, edutain them. Show them how good it is while they are receiving some positive change. Obviously, there are course units, and there are some universities now that are coming up. I have a friend in Ghana, but he's studying about climate change, and he's yet to graduate. So we see that it's better if we bring it in a form of entertaining youths. I have personally done some research and seen that people do not want, that actual things.
People's attention span is low, and people love something that is interesting.
It's all about mainly entertainment, and TikTok and other platforms can still help. You find that it is education, but someone is getting interested. And we should also focus as students on looking into how we can help. There are some people I usually see on the streets having those large sacks, but carrying plastics. How can we reward those people? As students who love our environment, you could go and do some help. you could carry out charity to those people because they are doing some great work, though they are looking like cleaners in the environment. So I would urge that we develop the love, just like my sister said, but then the love comes in as an implementation from those concerned. Specifically,
we transform passion to action.
Specifically from the government to the institutions, then following the students. But it shouldn't come boring. I reiterate on that.
All right. So your advocacy is on packaging of information relating to climate change should be one that is interesting, entertaining, but quite informative. I think that would be a very interesting way of us coming up with innovative solutions to get young people involved and young people engaged in the fight against climate change. You see on various social media platforms, when something, let's say there's a challenge or there is a particular trend, very, very many young people get involved and all of them want to push or advocate or do that particular trend. And yet you could come up with an environment trend that is helping to disseminate information, get people involved, but also in a way disseminate or give them information. I think that's very good.
But on that very well, Drake, I've seen, I think every year there is always a Green Festival in Kampala. And how about if now these organizers always have activations in different institutions so that we are looking, if you're having that Green Festival maybe in October, let's have activations in different institutions maybe from January. At that time, like we are visiting institutions, we give these people trees to go and plant, we advise them, we give them knowledge about conserving the environment, so that by that time we get to the festival, at least you have traversed the entire country and people have got the knowledge. But you see it's advertised and it's only 1 day or 2 days event. Yet some people could not be even aware of such.
That's very true. And I think it's very important when we are having these conversations in our various institutions, in our various forums, we need to come up with innovative solutions and innovative ideas to get people involved, because the idea of inclusion is very important. That irrespective of the gender, irrespective of our age, we need to live in a sustainable environment. One that we came and found that is okay, but also our future children and future grandchildren will also experience the same feel that we had. Not that we came and destroyed everything and then the next generation that comes after us has nothing at all to live with. So briefly, before we go into the break, I'll just quickly allow us to come up, possibly suggest innovative ideas. Just come up with interesting ways of us packaging information relating to climate change. And for our viewers out there, if at all you have any, please go ahead and suggest it on the comment section. We keep the conversation going. We pick the ideas and see how we transform our passion into action and we protect our environment. So quickly, I'll begin in no particular order with you, Barbra.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the people responsible for climate issues in the country or in Africa at large should come up with some rewardings to different people who do some things for the environment. For example, they can put up a challenge, maybe on social media. It can be Instagram, it can be TikTok, because TikTok is more commonly used nowadays by the youth. So they can come up with some challenges and they put up a reward for the winners. The youths will be sensitized and they'll definitely get on track.
Would be involved. Beautiful. Thank you. Fahad, what do you think? Apart from the edutainment, maybe you could add on to the aspect of interesting packaging of the information of climate change. What other innovative ideas do you have, or you still stick with that?
I would say that probably there are a lot of things from which you want to acquire money. And private sectors have greatly, should I say, exploited in one way or the other, the consumers. But how about if there is enforcement of attaching price to waste from the private sectors? Like the bottling companies, you attach a price to a bottle after being used. When some person struggling out there chooses to go and start picking bottles all over the street, will you have to buy that waste back in your company? So how about if the government helps out in running that kind of campaign to see that each and every production company attaches a price to its wastes. Polythene papers should have a price attached to them in case they become waste back in the environment. That when I come and collect polythene papers and take them back to the company that is manufacturing, for example, in quotes, for Vera, I would get some money. It means that we are recycling, but in a form that we are gaining from it. So that is another thing that I would say would help out, and people would go out there to look out for those things, because we are literally in a state where if I get what to eat today, I'll wait for another day. I don't need anything else.
We are just surviving on the day. Don't care what happens tomorrow, but if today you've eaten, which is absurd, but that's the reality. Patience, what innovative solutions or ideas do you have that you think we can go ahead and adopt as we're transforming our passion into action as young people? What can we do? How can we get involved as we have this Africa Climate Summit going on? For our young people who are there on the summit, what can they suggest so that the policymakers can implement?
Thank you so much, Drake. Basically, what I realized of recent is that this month we had a lot of runs. Cancer run, the run for the orphans, for the little children. I urge the government out there, or the delegates, or the people who are in charge of environment and climate change, at least once in a while you come out and say we are having the environmental run as well. Not just any other run, but this run is just to teach us on how to conserve our environment. Another point as well, we should also make use of the 3 R's. We have reuse, reduce, and recycle. Like the way he said earlier on, you find that around our homes, you find people moving with sacks behind their back. They usually collect bottles. In our homes, you find that very many people don't boil water, but they'll buy cartons of water, this bottled water. So if you take that bottled water, where are you going to? Are you going to just throw it just like that? Please keep it and make reuse of it. Reduce on what you buy. Boil water, just buy a bottle of water out there. Water bottles, be using that. Through that, we are going to make use of the 3 R's, the reduce, reuse, and recycle. And lastly, we should be more of a solution, not pollution to the environment.
More of a solution, not pollution. My brother Nyombi, just before we go into the break, what innovative ideas, what innovative solutions can we adopt? Can our young delegates who are in Nairobi come up with and recommend to the policymakers?
Yeah, like Fahad said, environmental conservation is a collective responsibility. It begins with us. Personally, I've attended several functions for my friends, and if I'm attending, maybe even if it's a burial, I've made it a habit to buy a fruit tree, take to the burial place, and we plant it. If it's a wedding, and Drake, if you ever think of inviting me on your wedding, or even
definitely, but that will be in a few years to come.
Yeah, our habits. I think we should be reviewing what are we as an individual. What are we doing to conserve the environment? Then as societies. We're talking about institutions of learning, primary school, secondary, and universities. This power is asking for school requirements, functional fees. How about on that charge that we are paying, we set aside a fee, at least 2,000 or even 5,000 of the money that we're paying for school requirements, so tuition, or functional fees, for basically buying a fruit tree, or you make it a requirement for a student to report to campus, or even as people to report to school. They must come on that day they're reporting, they must come with a tree so that this one is planted. If you look around, how many trees have been planted in your area over the past 6 months? You may find that none has been planted. By using charcoal, people are littering waste everywhere. And also things to do with recycling. I think Patience has talked about them. Let's look at other alternatives as well. Let's advocate for policies as well that are engineered at maybe having innovative solutions. Let's have innovative solutions that are aimed at preserving our environment.
All right. There you've had it from the young people. Quite brilliant, quite innovative, and quite passionate. In this first half of the conversation, we talked about climate change impact in Africa. We looked into education and awareness, how we can help disseminate information to our parents, to our benefactors, our guardians, among others. We also talked about innovative solutions and innovative ways how we can help package conversations relating to climate change to make it more interesting, term-less edutainment. Otherwise, keep with us and continue, come up with your solutions, recommendations on the comment section. Let's keep the conversation going. We'll be right back. Let's just go for a short break. See you shortly. Bye-bye.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Hey there, our dear esteemed and lovely viewers. Right before we went into the break, we are talking about Africa Climate Summit, the role of students in protecting our environment. And earlier on said that the Africa Climate Summit is co-hosted by the government of Kenya and an African Union to help showcase climate finance and help us come with adaptive solutions to climate change. That said, I've been joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen from Islamic University in Uganda and Muteesa One Royal University here in Kampala. So joining me for this discussion, as earlier on introduced themselves, Mr. Nyombi, Miss Patience, Mr. Fahad, and Miss Barbra. So before we went into the break, the conversation was around climate change impact in Africa, student-led initiatives, and then education and awareness. And we came up with innovative solutions and ideas of how best we can engage in this conversation. So let me get to you, Barbra.
Yeah.
Advocacy is a very powerful tool. By the virtue of the fact that you're seated here and you have the capacity to look into the camera and influence someone, it is something that very many people look at and people look up to you. So how can we use our various platforms to advocate for climate action?
Okay, thank you so much. First and foremost, I think the leaders of Africa and Uganda as a country should also engage in this.
Yeah.
They should also start putting up something that is going to be sensitizing, or that is going to be of use to the conservation of the environment.
Yeah.
Because if the youths or students see leaders come up, maybe posting something about environment on their social media handles, they're also going to come up and they're going to be like, okay, even Minister so-and-so is doing this, even President is doing this, so why don't I also do it? And when a student comes up and they start posting something on maybe their TikTok, because, you know, like Fahad said, youths love entertainment so much. And of late, TikTok is the most entertaining social media right now. So a student out there can come up with maybe a song or a play, drama, and post it on their TikTok or other social medias, and others will definitely follow that and information will be delivered.
Powerful. Thank you very much. It's very important that we use what we have in our various capacities to advocate for climate action. Fahad, my line of question is in advocacy and policy. Earlier on said my sister Patience and my brother Haruna highlighted the fact that we have very many laws and good policies, but with very limited implementation. And before we went to the break, we were talking about transforming our passion into action. So how can students advocate for policy change, policy implementation, to better front the idea of climate action?
Yeah, thank you very much. Basing on what you've just asked me, students play a pivotal role in seeing many things implemented within various countries. And students' engagement in any activity, at times, it doesn't come to waste. We see that many things that students have rallied behind, they have been a success. During the time when we wanted revolutions, we saw that students from Makerere came out and joined the struggle and saw themselves in power lately. So we also see that because of students, many ideas are being put into action. So I would say that students, first of all, should have themselves organized like in organizations or in kind of associations. And those associations should be targeting specifically climate change. We know that humanity is evil, but then climate change is hostile. You might want to destabilize climate, but then the impact of that would be even hostile than anything you've ever seen. So students should be fighting to see that at least if I come out as a person and start advocating for solutions to climate change, I should also have hope that I'll be heard. Just as Vanessa Nakate said, there is no voice too small to be heard about climate change. So however small the voice might be, you might not be standing in front of a camera, but when you come out and say no to deforestation and put on shirts with hashtags, no to use of charcoal, no to this and this, with time, it will take what? It will take shape. And I advise everyone watching that we should start as soon as possible to take on those trends. And in the near future, we shall be joined by even those that are currently redundant. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we go further, your advocacy looks at ways of putting out information like banners, among others. Personally, I hold a view that the climate effects that we experience as Uganda is not very far different from what Kenya faces or what Rwanda faces or what South Africa faces. We are a global village. We experience different challenges, but they're similar in a way. And climate is one that cuts across all that we face. But what changes is our adaptive capacity, that we have a very low adaptive capacity. But on the question of, let's say we advocate no charcoal, do you think that is feasible enough? Because majority of our population uses charcoal as a means of cooking. Majority of our population uses firewood. Remember when we began the conversation, we agreed that climate change hits poor people hardest. So as we as students were having this conversation on advocacy and policy, how can we then transition in a systematic manner that we leave no one behind? Let's say we are not using charcoal. What other best alternative could then therefore be? Or can we transition slowly, let's say phase 1, phase 2? Maybe advise us on that manner.
Okay, probably I have about 2 to 3 solutions or substitutes to what we can see as charcoal. Some other things might be fossil fuels, but not as dangerous as the carbon emitted from charcoal. For example, I was at a certain summit and we're still talking about plantation of trees, of those, trees that take long. Like they take a long time, the hardwood, those of hardwood timber, like the mahogany. We were at Masengere there in Uganda. And then when we were looking at the substitute for charcoal, we said at least we can, for now, be using, gas. Gas is also something that is dangerous towards climate, but then
it has low CO2
It has
emissions.
low, like you just said. So probably we have to hit back to the government as we advocate, reduce on the taxes that you do that you charge on the on those that are producing gas. So we can be having gas cylinders instead of having the visible smoke that we see while we are burning timber. Then the other thing, we could also look at like solar energy. Solar energy is something that has come to help out even someone who doesn't have hydroelectric power. And it can still be used to power coils for cooking. It can still be used for many things, and it is not emitting any gases. Then the other thing, the third one, biogas. There are companies that are coming up, and the government should make sure that it gives them first priority as far as wanting to curb the effects of what? Climate change. So if companies come up and they are bringing biogas as a means to substitute burning of fossil fuels, I think subsidize them and encourage them to come into public and people adopt to use of such things. Just like in Rwanda, you rarely find people using charcoal because it has been banned. You know, if charity fails at home, then the government has to impart it into the citizens. Thank you very much.
All right, Nyombi, before I come to your question, he suggests that we need to advocate, put on shirts, use our various forums, no charcoal, no. I hold the view that when we're advocating, we need to advocate from a realistic point of view.
Sure.
That you see, as we all agreed anonymously that we're a poor country. And being a poor country means when we are transitioning to, let's say, the just transition that talks about shifting from high high emissions to low emission solutions. And what it suggests is the use of gas. But then we have activists who are against the idea of exploiting our oil here in this country. They hold banners saying, stop ECOP, right?
Sure.
And yet the countries that developed through exploitation of oil. And these are the same people that are telling us, you know what? You should not exploit your oil. The solution is quite feasible and it's okay. But then the issue is gas is quite expensive. A bag of charcoal, approximately that half bag costs 60 to 80,000 Ugandan shillings, which a household can use it for either a month or half 2 weeks in a month. Of course, a month is 4 weeks,
Yeah.
so they can use it for 2 weeks. That means that household can survive on that. We also have people who buy charcoal on a daily basis, which is quite affordable for them, and you cannot buy gas on a daily basis. So now, let us, when we talk about advocacy and policy, how can we then influence our policymakers, and also we as activists who go ahead and make noise, stop ECOP, to come up with a feasible, realistic solution that advocates and includes that poor person who doesn't know these things, but must survive and must live in this country.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this back again, because I've remembered we had some conversation with patients some weeks ago about the same.
Yeah.
One, apart from behavior change from individuals, talked about Rwanda. I was in Rwanda for about 2 years, and every last weekend of the month, we had to wake up and before midday, nobody was allowed to leave home. So you had to always make sure that your environment is clean, the community engagement. So that means at the back of your mind, before even that day, you must ensure that you minimize the workload that you'll have at the end of the month. That means by ensuring that the environment is conserved, so that by that week, you have less to do as a policy. So that means government has always to come in to set good policies that even help citizens to engage, even those who are reluctant to. There should be those policies that are geared towards saying that everyone is brought to the table. Because I say this is a collective responsibility for all of us, you and I and everyone outside there, that this is our environment. She talked about patriotism. It begins with you as an individual. But beyond that, what are other priorities that we have as a government in terms of investment? Let's try to invest as young people. We should try to involve government in terms of policy advocacy, so that they have they prioritize things that are geared towards saying that we are having a sustainable environment. In terms of innovation, if we are having innovative ideas, things to do with development of solar energy, solar system, or even alternatives to these other types of energy that are going to deplete our environment, how can we influence government to support us? And I think this is through our voices. We as the citizens, we cannot talk a lot. We cannot do much apart from talking. So I believe we can use these spaces that we have. I joined social media after my senior 6, but my sibling is on almost all of them and is just in senior 2. So you can imagine how many of them are on social media. And if we planned it very well and if we involved them in terms of equipping them with knowledge about the environment, they will know that this is bad, and if there's an idea, they have to talk about it because they're all on social media. Yeah. So if they talk about it, we can influence the government to set its priorities right towards saying that now we're having a sustainable environment where the environment has been conserved. In terms of ideas, young people, we can come out with innovative ideas and also influence the government. Let's get involved at leadership level. Leadership begins from where you are, maybe at the institution you are at school. Because if you're a leader, you have a greater voice than others, and it's from there that you will develop, you will evolve into national leaders. I'm glad you were part of the national parliament and you raised some of these issues. But if someone has not been involved in leadership from childhood, they will not be able to bring out their voices, to instill confidence into them. We are having this space simply because we have been brought to this space and from different institutions, and we have passion for our environment. And so if we get to utilize all the spaces that we have, if you are a prefect in that primary school, if you are a prefect or a student leader in secondary and even at university level, we have the Uganda National Students Association, and they've been moving around the country. How about in their program as the ONSA, they try to have such programs as well, that when we're talking to students, we talk about issues concerning the environment. And as such, we believe we can have an impact. We can have some kind of change towards this.
All right, thank you. Collective responsibility.
True.
That's your argument. Patience. In the first half of the conversation, you highlighted that as a country, we have a number of laws and policies, but the issue is on failure to implement them. And as advocates, as people who are fending and fighting for the environment, we ought to hold the government accountable because we hold a social contract with them. That means they have the responsibility to see that we are protected and cared for. In the objectives of our constitution, it calls for, of course, they have to protect the environment. That is something that it captures national interest, and that entails protection of the environment because it's where we derive our sustenance from. True. So how best, when we are advocating, how best can we, what solutions would you recommend for the government to better implement the laws and policies that they have in place?
Thank you so much. Like I had brought it out earlier, we have laws, rules and conventions which are put in place to protect the environment and also protect us from facing many challenges that come about through climatic change. And I also said earlier that these laws are not fully implemented. So what the government should rather do, we have very many TV platforms, social media platforms. Why not come up with plays, shows, for instance, of late, ahead of the wild bushfires happening in different parts of the country, different parts of the continent. Put that, bring it out, play it for the Ugandans to really see what is happening there. Bring it to the face of Ugandans that if you carry out deforestation, like totally cutting down the trees, this is what we are going to encounter. And if you're cutting down trees, the government should ensure that cut down trees and also practice afforestation. Ugandans, we have what we call, indeed we are ignorant about the law, and ignorance is not a defense per se. So we have We have this saying, we developed the ancient ways of farming, we Ugandans.
Unsustainable practices.
Yes. Basically, people who live in the mountainous areas have to practice terrace, but that is not the issue right now. People are carrying out whatever thing that comes into their mind, that is what they are doing. And yet the government of Uganda has played a big role to ensure that our environment is suitable for us to live in. It is just that we, the citizens, that we are ignorant enough to adopt to that. Of recent, the government themselves came out and said that whoever has a car should at least have a dustbin in the car. What is that supposed to mean? That indeed the government has come out, tried to curb these challenges that we are yet to face. But right now, trust me, Drake, how many people have dustbins in their car? The law has been placed, no one is following it. It has just been left like that. So the government out there should not give up on us citizens. They should try more. Just like a baby who is learning how to crawl, it's just a step. They should keep on sensitizing us. We should have, we have lots of NGOs, we have Rotary clubs. They should at least move in different institutions to ensure that at least there is a club, that particular club, that deals with environment change in the country. Through that, we shall be able to curb this disease that we are passing through.
Nyombi had something to say quickly.
I just wanted to have some disagreement with that.
Yeah.
There is already a law in place, and you cannot blame it on the citizens if the law is not implemented. I think it's the responsibility of the government to implement the laws. The National Environmental Act. There is a section that talks about preserving the environment. But even you're saying the people who are supposed to regulate or even to implement these laws, some of them are the perpetrators of these acts that are being done and spoiling our environment, destruction of the wetlands, the forests. These are people in the government, the ones that we would have looked up to. So in that way, I think government, to a large extent, hasn't played its role very well, because citizens have to be guided. Because, there could be those who are ignorant. Like she said, ignorance of the law is not a defense. So that's where government has to come in and guide her to implement, even if it means bring out the iron hand, so that you enforce these laws. My government is failing on that. So I think it's, to a large extent...
I see patience is burning to respond. Let us have that debate settled, and then I can come and engage. Barbara, go ahead and respond.
Nyombi is very clear that there are laws put in place. But it is we, the citizens, that are ignorant about the law. Particularly, you mentioned, is it the
National Environment Act?
Section 13 of that law states that everyone expects the environment around them to be clean. And it is a right that every citizen of Uganda is entitled. Like, every citizen in Uganda is entitled to a clean and healthy environment.
Yeah.
Why should I wait for the government to tell me what to do? I'm a citizen. That's my right. Meaning that, let me bring it out in a context, in a university, we're in class, or we are right here in the studio. I find a piece of paper. Should I wait for the owner of this place to come and take that paper away? Obviously, no.
That's how you argue for
That's where I
collective
came in, that if I've done short of my responsibility, I'm duty bound to do something. I have a right, but there's someone who is duty bound to ensure that this is in place. If I have failed to do something, there's someone that is responsible for enforcing what I have failed to do as a citizen. And in this case, the government.
It's all right. But when we continue that debate, we shan't have it end. Barbara, we can't have this conversation of Africa Climate Summit, the role of students in protecting the environment, without mentioning innovation and technology. You understand, or that you know, we are in a modern day and age where tech has taken over very many of our things. How we farm, how we live, even how we live at home. We have robots that do clean for us, robots who do most of the housework. We have AIs who have eased our work. You know, all this is technology. So among that, we also have other innovations here that our young people have come up with so as to protect the environment. For example, making of charcoal briquettes to help curb to help remove plastics from the environment and come up with charcoal briquettes to reduce the waste on the environment. So my question is, do you like know any other innovative ideas or innovative solutions that have been implemented, like the making of charcoal briquettes, that help reduce the adverse effects of climate change in Uganda?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to say something about about what
Please go ahead.
Patience was saying.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
I want to say something very small.
Yeah.
It's not that people are ignorant about environment, but it's just that people do not like they do not like their space, they do not like their country. Because a person who cannot even find employment in their own country,
They're frustrated.
There's no way this person is going to love it. And there's no way you're going to convince this person to stop cutting down the trees or to start sensitizing others to protect the environment. Yeah. And about innovation, I think students or youths can come up with, I have seen students come up with seats with empty bottles, maybe bottles of water. People come up with seats, and these are very, very nice things.
For tires,
Yeah,
for cutters.
that even people buy. So you find these students earning and at the same time protecting the environment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Nyombi, if you can further the conversation on innovation and technology, realize that people are very creative. People are coming up with ideas, with solutions that are not only helping the environment, but also deriving a living out of it. For example, I think it's AirQ here in Kampala that came up with technology that helps to detect the air quality in our country, and they're deriving a living out of it. So give us some of those examples and how best we can go ahead and leverage from those innovations and technologies.
You called Nyombi.
Oh, no, not Nyombi.
Sorry,
Fahad. Fahad, sorry.
So maybe you can pardon me.
The issue is, we're talking about innovation and technology. We have seen a number of young people coming up with innovative ideas and solutions for climate change. For example, I think it's AirQ, if I'm not quoting the name right, the company that came up with tech to detect air quality within Kampala metropolitan, and they're deriving a living out of it. So maybe you could give us examples of some of those innovative solutions and technologies that are successful and are protecting the environment.
Oh, thank you very much for that question. Then maybe to provide solution to it, apart from those, companies coming up to detect how much of our air is polluted, we also have companies that are coming up to provide solution on how we can curb the effect of air pollution. I want to thank the students of Makerere University who came up with Kira EV. Kira EV is some kind of technology that allows using of road transport without emitting any without emitting any gas, electric cars from Kira EV. We also have some motorists who are now riding, but without fuel. You just need a battery and then you ride. I also want to thank Tesla. He's also some other innovative guy. He's called Elon Musk. He's done something that is very innovative, and we as people have to give him a token of thanks, because through it, and if we adopt only that, it is still quite expensive for...
Quite. It's actually very expensive.
Yeah, very expensive. But if we could adopt to that, then we would see maybe banning all the cars that use fuel. We will no longer have pumps, stations, and we shall only need electricity to fuel our cars.
I think that will take some good time, because when you talk about just transition, it's a process, and shifting away from high carbon emission components to low emission, it's a process. Just like at the moment we're finding it hard for us to transition from charcoal to gas. Now imagine us running from jumping from diesel or petrol cars to electric cars. Oh God, that's quite hard, but it's a process.
So maybe if that one, actually, it is very difficult, and it will seem very difficult for some good time. But then I was traversing Bugolobi, and there are companies still that are using those buses to travel, to take passengers. So their companies are making sure that they at least inform citizens or inform people to leave back home their cars and use those buses because they'll reach your destination. You know, they're very comfortable, and if you use them, you find yourself reach your destination. So public means of transport is some other innovative thing or innovative idea that has come up to see that at least we protect our environment from excessive emission of greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
But that's very well. No? I was watching news some time back. In as much as it seems to be costly, while I was watching that bulletin, in the short run, it's expensive, but in the long run, you can save a lot of money, save money and even in the environment. So it's only costly maybe in terms of purchasing, if this car is purchasing these cars, even manufacturing, but in the long run, you're going to save a lot of money. So I think it gets back to government. How do we make this less costly and affordable to the citizens so that they can shift from these traditional modes of transport where we are using fuel, then we shift now to the Kira. There be a policy. Government is funding Kira EV, but the same government is still purchasing vehicles from Japan and other countries. Why don't they channel all that money they're using to purchase vehicles from outside so that they manufacture vehicles for government officials, so that we use these vehicles and we ease the cost of production, these people that they're incurring, and even make it, we influence the citizens to use the same cars. But you cannot influence me to go and buy vehicles from Kira EV, yet you, the person who's funding that very project, you're buying cars from Japan and America. It's incompatible.
Yeah, there's some people who advocate for buy Uganda, build Uganda, and there's some people who go ahead and import their products from
Let's walk the talk.
Yeah, true. Thank you. Let's then take the conversation to I want us to look into climate justice and equity. I earlier on highlighted that, you see, the countries with historically low greenhouse gas emissions are the ones that are facing adverse effects of climate change, and that is a call for climate justice. Africa as a continent emits less than 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and yet we are at the moment the most affected continent and the most prone continent to extreme climate risks. That said, that calls for climate justice, and that calls for equity, that calls for climate financing. Patience, I want us to have, I want you to just briefly give us, tell us why exactly climate justice is important for Africa. I understand that earlier on we talked about we're a poor continent. But why is it that it's very important aside from the poverty that we face? Why do we need the equity? Why do we need the finance?
Thank you so much, Drake. The reason as to why we need all that is because before I even answer that point, Uganda as a country, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as my research, I quote, we like comparing ourselves with other countries. And yet we are way backward with those countries that we compare ourselves quietly with. So the reason as to why we need climate justice and equity, if I should bring it out in a way of, we have many people in the country who fall sick. And you find someone is healthy, someone eats well, someone sleeps in a very comfortable environment, a very comfortable place. But you find this person is sick. This person is suffering from all sorts of chronic illnesses. And you don't know where this comes from. It's from the environment. It's because of our activities with our environment that is causing this. Cut down trees. We are burning, we have, like the previous speaker said, we have cars on the streets. Those cars, I think people don't service them.
Obviously.
You're on a board and someone has that smoke, terrible smoke. You're falling sick through that. So we need climate justice and equity to avoid all that. To avoid very many people falling sick, people are suffering from asthma. Someone will easily say it's because of the sprays, it's because of this. But where you move, we really capture a lot out there where we are. And we don't know. That's the main reason as to why we need justice.
Let me get to you, Fahad, then I get to Nyombi, then I come back to Barbra. We're still on the question of climate justice and equity. So my question to you is, how can students ensure that climate action takes into account the needs and rights of marginalized communities in Africa? Maybe to put context in the conversation, marginalized communities are women, are young people, persons with disabilities. You understand that they are the most affected. So how can students ensure that climate action takes into account the needs of those people?
So students, as I told you back, that have been forerunners of various programs that have come to success. And where students stand, maybe to advocate for something, we've seen that it comes to success. So the marginalized groups, however, in this context of climate change, everybody is marginalized. I don't breathe maybe nitrogen and someone else is breathing what? Oxygen. We are all marginalized. But here then we should focus on who are the marginalized people when we talk of marginalization. So when you talk of those, those groups of the marginalized people, we look at students coming in to make at least a follow-up of what aid comes from non-government organizations to those groups, and is it really being put into consideration? Because in case there are some diverse effects, like diseases coming from the air we breathe in, then are those people receiving aid to cure those diseases? Students should make sure that at least they raise their voices to see those people finding help from especially the non-government organizations. Because the government at least allows these organizations to run in the country, but then are they really doing the exact work, or they're just, I should say, I don't know, it is allegedly said that some of them even come to do what? To spy. So are they actually targeting the orphans? Are they targeting the widowed? Are they targeting those marginalized people? Or they are doing their own things? So students should always call upon those people, the ones concerned, to say that at least people get their aid as it has been done as it has been signed out. Otherwise, without the voices of students, we shall find that we leave the duty to politicians who always have their own targets, and after achieving them, they will back off and leave you without having any hope. That's what I can say.
Thank you. Just before we wrap up the conversation, I don't want us to conclude the conversation before talking about collaborating and networking. And this question will go to both Barbra and Nyombi. You understand that the conversation of climate change cuts across the continents, cuts across the globe. So how important is it for African students to network and collaborate with other international students and organizations to come up with adaptive and innovative solutions? Nyombi, you can go first, and I'll have Barbra.
Thank you. Before I address that question, you talked about climate justice and equity, and I want to quote President William Ruto's statement. He said, we need to make those who have made us reach here to this crisis, to hold them accountable and build the systems that work for everyone. Like we said earlier on, in Africa, we are also suffering largely because of the actions of the people outside this continent. So we must find ways of how do we hold these people. But even within, you see there are factories, there are industries around. People are just left free. I think you've been to Mukono and those areas of Namamve. Are we holding these people accountable? These ones who are contributing to all these effects that we are discussing here. How are we making them accountable to this? How are they paying for their actions? So I think that should be part of the discussion that we should be having as people, as a society and as institutions. Then back to your question, as students, I think we are endowed, we have spaces, apparently we have spaces that we can share ideas. For instance, the civic space here, at least everyone is watching us across the globe. We can use our social networks, our social media handles to talk about this and engage the population out there. At least we know that I can speak to someone who is in the US every time that I want. So on our social media platforms, every time we get a chance to talk, can we involve in such discussions that are going to impact our communities in terms of conserving the environment? Let's bring up discussions over and again. We should never get tired of talking about them. Because as we talk about them, there's another person who had never heard of this. But at least they are going to pay attention, oh, what are these guys talking about? And so they're going to learn a thing or two, and they'll think about it some other time. And the message will be spreading. And in this very way, we will be even advocating for policies. At least we have talked to the government here. Of all the people in leadership, at least there will be a few who are going to listen to these words. They sit down and reflect on what we have said. They think about the generations to come, and at least they review the policies and work. But most importantly, we should also involve ourselves in leadership. Because it's only at leadership level that we are going to influence policies. We are going to change things. There's nobody that's going to do this for us. We must get involved as young people. We must get on board. We must find our spaces, reclaim those spaces to ensure that what we want is being done. If it's activism, Vanessa did it. And right now she has she has traveled the entire world using the same, saying the same words, at least to different people, preaching the same message. She began from Makerere University here at MOBS by putting up placards, and people got her message. So I think we can emulate her. We use whatever space that we are having to put out the message in whatever form. He talked about t-shirts. Put in a t-shirt with the word plant a tree. Many people are okay. Of all the people that are going to see that, at least there will be a few who are going to pick a message from what you're putting on. Yeah, if you put up a placard, if you write a post on your Facebook wall, when you put up that picture, my friend Barbra, if you post that beautiful picture of yours and put the caption about the environment, at least you will be picking someone's mind. And in one way or the other, we are going to change our society in terms of mindset and also influencing. Imagine, because we're now having a lot of students, many universities, many institutions, and over 20,000. Makerere alone is admitting about 15,000 students every year. Now, you can't imagine how many are in the different universities. Approximately about 1 million students. If one day all as students we came up and talked about the same thing about our environment, I'm sure that voice will be heard by someone, and they'll change the policies and even what to do.
Thank you. Barbra, maybe quickly, as you also give us your parting shots, tell us how networking and collaboration can help us advance this conversation of climate action, and then you can wind up with your concluding messages.
Okay, Thank you so much. Networking is very important in the issue of environment and climate, most so to the countries or areas that are mostly affected by the climatic changes. For example, African countries. With networking, the youth can get to know what other continents do to eliminate some things. Because those other continents also suffer the consequences of climatic changes, but not as bad as we suffer in Africa. So with networking, students here can get to know what those others do to eliminate some of these things. And the other thing is, through networking, the people who have suffered climatic changes, for example, the people who no longer have places to stay, a place to stay, people who do not have food to eat because of climatic changes, can get sponsors from those other continents that are able to sponsor, because the government cannot help everyone in Uganda, or governments in Africa cannot help everyone in Africa. But through networking, those people can get to know what is really happening in Africa, and they can save the situation.
Definitely. As your parting shots, what are your final messages or your final words to our viewers out there?
I'm just happy. I'm so happy because Africa came up with the African Climate Summit. You never know, as Africa, as a continent, we may come up with some solutions as far as climatic changes are concerned. And I do urge delegates of countries all around Africa to get included in this thing, because it's really important. I heard that some presidents of Africa didn't go to attend, but it's very important.
Thank you. Fahad, your parting shots, brother.
Maybe to sum up everything, I would like to thank everybody who makes sure that at least they find a lasting solution towards the impact or towards curbing down the problems of climate change. Starting from the COP countries, COP27, where we see members coming to, to mitigate and see that at least there are some solutions towards the problems of climate change. The last one was in Egypt. Now we shall be going to Dubai. And with time, I know there are even some promises of reparations or paying back, because during the times many countries were emitting gases, Africa wasn't part of that. So Africa needs to be paid in order to run this campaign very well. So I want to urge everyone watching to at least campaign for reparations before we can all join arms to see that there is change in the impacts of climate. We can see that due to problems arising, and I've heard everyone saying that Africa is being affected the most. It is being affected the most because it is weak, and even the weak problems will affect us the most. But go to the United States, Hawaii, wildfires. Go here in Greece, wildfires in Turkey. You see, so Africa has not gotten those problems, but we are weak, and the weak problems are affecting us according to our capacity. So I call upon everyone to join this campaign, and we see that we find lasting solutions towards climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Powerful. Patience.
What I will end with is that our planet is our home, and let us develop the love for our environment. Let us keep Uganda, particularly since Uganda is the pearl of Africa, let us keep it green always. With passion, we can easily curb environmental issues and also curb the climatic changes that we are suffering with right now.
Thank you. Nyombi.
Yeah, my final remarks are to everyone that's out there, and even my colleagues that I'm with here. It's a responsibility for all of us, individually and even as societies. So we need to act, and the sooner we do that, the better. Otherwise, by the time we wake up, we cannot wait for this thing that Fahad has been talking about to come to us. Already we've suffered a lot as Africa, and therefore we need to act immediately. Tackle the issues of pollution, environmental conservation. Let's try to say that we conserve our environment. Let's change our behaviors. And I think that's the critical thing, behavior change. If we change our behaviors as individuals, then as a society, we can come together. If any of us holds out, then you can really act on them. But if everyone is careless, they don't mind about what they're doing, then even their neighbors, they won't care. So let's act. Let's act and hold those ones that are responsible for whatever mess that's around, we hold them accountable. Thank you.
All right, then there you've heard it from our distinguished panelists. Tonight we're discussing about Africa Climate Summit, the role of students in protecting the environment. I don't want to again spoil, because they have done justice to tonight's conversation, but I'll conclude and say, with the words of William Ruto, that climate action is not an issue of the global north or the global south. It's one that affects all of us, and we need to come up with a common global solution. Otherwise, my name is Douglas Onen. I've been your host for tonight's show. See you again next week, same time, same place. Please keep watching and keep the comments going in the comment section. Subscribe and continue. Otherwise, thanks to Civic Space TV, Center for Constitutional Governance, and technical crew, Rashid and Tim. Thank you. See you again next week. Bye-bye.